After spending your whole journey going from gym to gym, earning badges and trying to beat the Pokemon League and become the new champion of your region, the question remains, what do you do after? I mean, do we just say I'm going to Disneyland, then power off our game and lay face up looking at the ceiling for the rest of the day? No! That's what Pokemon Postgames are for, giving us a little something extra to do once the main journey of becoming champion is over, because the journey never ends. Pokemon Postgames and what to expect from them varies in every game, with some giving us whole new challenges like the Battle Frontier, while others are not as grand. To some, Pokemon Postgames are just an afterthought, and who really cares if the main game is the best thing about it? Why would I care about what happens after the game's already over? Well, you'd be quite surprised that some of these are actually really good. But we've strayed from the days of a regular old postgame and have entered a new era of capitalism. I mean DLC! Since Pokemon Sword and Shield, DLC has become the new norm for Pokemon postgames, giving us much more expansion and stuff to do than ever before. With Scarlet and Violet's DLC even giving us one of my favorite new editions of the Land of Kitakami. But this of course leads to the question, which is better? Previous styled postgames or DLC? In today's video, I'm gonna let you be the judge. I'm gonna go through all the postgames and all the DLC for every Pokemon game that it is available in, and we're just gonna talk about the pros and the cons of both, and I'm gonna leave it up to you in the comment section to let me know which you prefer. I definitely have a lot of good memories with some postgames from Pokemon, but I will also acknowledge that not all of them have as much content as others, and I think that that is the perk of the DLC, is there's just more content. I mean, if you're paying money, you hope to get more out of it. And hey, downloadable content for Pokemon games may not be free, but you want to know what is? Subscribing to the channel down below. But it's time that we move into the end game. Let's talk about DLC versus post games in the Pokemon series. First, let's talk Pokemon post games. And for Pokemon post games, I think the way that I would define these is any sort of event or new opportunity or new place to go or new Pokemon to catch that exclusively opens up as soon as you beat the Elite Four and the champion at the end of the game. For Generation 1, it's understandable that there wasn't really a primary focus on post-games or having a lot of content to do because it was the literal first generation. There just wasn't much to do aside from the main campaign, and so afterwards you get to go and catch Mewtwo, which was very exciting at the time because Mewtwo being the last Pokemon that you were likely to catch in the game for a game where you want to catch them all was really cool. The Gen 1 remakes Fire Red and Leaf Green eventually added a little bit more to do in their post-game with the Sevi Islands, which I thought was a really fun adventure and experience, and it kind of brought me back to the Orange Islands from the anime, and it kind of makes me wonder why they didn't just do that. But nonetheless, it still was a lot of fun to have a completely new area to explore, especially in somewhere like Kanto that I feel like definitely could benefit from it. It still wasn't the craziest post game, but I did enjoy having a new place to go and new Pokemon to catch. Generation 2, on the other hand, has one of the most famous post-games of any Pokemon entry into the series, and we all know what I'm talking about. We get to go through 2 whole regions, and anyone who says that they don't like this, y'all, you don't like fun. You don't like fun, you don't like a good time, because I get that yes, it's like a shortened version of Kanto, it's not really going through the whole region again, but it was still a super grand experience and felt like such a massive thing to do in the post game that made me just excited. It made me want to keep playing the game, which I would say is the biggest job of a post game to do. I mean, you get to have 16 total gym badges by the end of this game. This is the only game still to this day where you are able to go to another region and partake in a second gym challenge. Other than that, we have one of the most epic final battles of any Pokemon game with the red fight on top of Mount Silver, and then of course there was the additions in Heart Gold and Soul Silver of the Battle Frontier, which I personally loved seeing make a mini return. Didn't feel exactly the same as the Emerald one, but I still appreciated it. Feel the way you may feel about the Johto region, but you cannot deny that Gen 2 has a super solid post game, if not one of the most solid post games in the series. For Generation 3's post game, we can lightly touch on Ruby and Sapphire's Battle Tower. It was fine. It was cute. Let's move on to Emerald. Emerald just made Ruby and Sapphire look like a total flop because Emerald was so freaking good. I love the Battle Frontier. I made an entire video talking about the Battle Frontier and how much I love and appreciate it. And if you can't tell by the way I talked about Gen 2's postgame and now talking about the Battle Frontier, I like getting like a complete separate challenge and a new gym challenge and things to do afterwards. I think what also helped this is that it was built throughout the entire game. I mean, we had Scott following us and telling us about how we were improving, and he eventually invited us to the Battle Frontier, and then it became a whole new like becoming the champion of the Battle Frontier, and I don't know, it just really was cool the way that they built it up the whole time, and I liked it. It made me feel like I was waiting to see what Scott was talking about and what was gonna happen at the end. We then in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, the remakes for Generation 3 got the Delta episode, and I don't know, I had some fun with this. I know some people don't love it. I had a good time with it. I think that the cutscenes were cool. I love Zinnia. I love the chance to interact with Steven more, of course, because that's my boy. I think if you're not gonna have a complete new area or challenge to explore and to do and partake in, I think this is the next best thing to do for a postgame and just have like a new story arc or new story event happen. So Gen 3 in the postgames also did not disappoint. So now moving on to Generation 4 in the Sinnoh region, the postgame here again, Diamond and Pearl. Not that amazing, not that stunning. Ready for another day of doing mediocre. I mean, you did get to catch a couple legendaries here and there, which I will always appreciate afterwards, especially if it is a new legendary we had not yet had the opportunity to get, and there was also the Battle Tower, but again, it just felt pretty fine. But that was until the Battle Zone, which I think definitely helped, definitely made it feel better, and I liked it a lot more. There was also another Battle Frontier. I mean, they saw the success and the glory of the previous Battle Frontier, and they decided to do it again. Granted, it was not the same Battle Frontier. It was, you know, not as good as the last Battle Frontier, but I still appreciated it, and I liked that it was there. For Generation 5, we had an entire new area of the Unova region to explore in the postgame that got a lot of new cities and places to explore, lots of new Pokemon to catch, especially in the first Black and White game where you literally can't get any other Pokemon aside from Unova ones until the postgame, which I think in itself was a big reason to look forward to it. There was the quest to find the other Plasma Sages, you could explore Challenger's Cave, and I think that was the biggest thing about Black and White is there was just a lot more areas to explore. Black 2 and White 2 completely expands on this even more, giving us those new areas and new Pokemon, but also gives us the World Tournaments. This is easily one of the best things I think Pokemon has ever given us, and I need to see it make a comeback and need to see it make a return. I don't know if Pokemon Champions is going to be anything like this, but I absolutely adored what they did here. I loved having all these other Pokemon trainers and champions coming in from all over the world, and we get to compete in a tournament with them. I think that is so awesome and amazing, and I think that this really just made the postgame for me. Then we move on to Generation 6 in X and Y, and this postgame I would say is the first one to where I started experiencing the meh-ness of some of these things, and that there wasn't really a lot of exciting things to do. I mean, you could go to Keylode City with the Friend Safari and the Battle Maison, but neither of those things were super exciting or interesting to me. I easily think the best thing about the X and Y postgame is the Looker side quests and meeting Emma, and I'm so happy to see Emma making a return in Legend ZA to show how important this postgame was. For Sun and Moon, the trend kind of continued to where there wasn't really a lot to do, there wasn't really any new areas to explore. We had the Battle Tree, which was kind of fun, I did have a good time there, but again, wasn't super exciting, or at least as exciting as some of the other battle frontiers and battle areas to explore in previous postgames, and the quest to capture the Ultra Beast just felt a little lackluster in this game. Now, all of this was improved upon in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, as everything was in those games, because all the Ultra Beast stuff just felt so much more exciting. We got to go to the worlds, we got to go through the wormholes, everything felt better with that, but also we get the whole Rainbow Rocket epilogue, where we got to see all these iconic villains coming back, and it gave us a big to-do story event at the end. I would compare this to the Delta episode in that way, and I think that it was honestly really fun, and I was happy to see it after two kind of lackluster postgames. Generation 8's post-game. Yeah, it exists. It's there. And Swordward and Shieldbert, yup. They were a thing. I feel bad saying this because I did recently make a video where I talked about how I think Sword and Shield actually deserve love and can be considered underrated to some players, but like, y'all, this post-game was not anything crazy. It's no wonder that they introduced DLC in this generation because this game low-key needed it. Then in Generation 9 Scarlet and Violet, once again, there was not really anything to do in the post-game other than rematch some gym leaders, complete your Pokedex, and compete in the Academy Ace tournament. That was pretty much it. But I do need to acknowledge with Generation 8 and Generation 9 that there is a reason for this in that there was DLC, of course. So why have your regular post-game be super exciting and fun with all this new content if you know you're going to be releasing DLC? I don't know if that makes it justified, but it does explain why these post-games may be a little more bland than normal. In conclusion, for Pokemon post-games before we move on to the DLC, I do think that most of these are actually pretty successful, and the lesser successful post-games are the ones that don't introduce as much to do and kind of just give like one or two new elements to it, with, interestingly enough, a lot of our good Pokemon post-games and the examples I would use to people coming from our sequel add-on games like the Emeralds, the Ultra Suns, the Ultra Moons, the Platinums. And this, I think, is a perfect segue to talking about something that I do want to talk about in the DLC section, which has to do with what I think DLC actually symbolizes and means moving forward for the Pokemon series. Now, we have gotten a lot of trio games, add-on games, whatever you want to call them, sequels. We've gotten a lot of things like that, like Pokemon Crystal, Pokemon Emerald, Pokemon Platinum, Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Like, we've gotten so many games to come out afterwards, taking place in the same region, but just adding on to it and adding more to the region to enhance the experience. I don't think that we're ever going to get a game like that ever again. And the reason is DLC. Now, you can debate in the comment section below if you think this is a good or a bad thing that we're never going to be getting another add-on game like this, but I do think that it is beneficial to have DLC in this way, in thinking about it in the way of, instead of buying a completely full new game, having to wait for that to come out, paying full price for it, you could just pay the price for something like DLC and get all of those new add-on features and all of the new stuff that you would want from a new add-on game like this, but you don't have to buy a new game. You could just add something onto a game you already have. You're still paying money. That's still happening, of course, because in this day and age, unfortunately, that's not going away anytime soon. But at least in this way, you don't have to wait for a completely new game to come out and pay full price for it when you could just get the DLC for all of your additional content. I mean, I absolutely think it would have been the case if Pokemon Sword and Shield or Scarlet and Violet were older games or came out in previous generations prior to DLC becoming a thing. These post games probably would have been added in a sequel game or add-on game afterwards. But let's get into it. Let's first dive into Pokemon Sword and Shield's DLC, which came in the form of the Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra, both of which came with a complete new area of the region to explore, with lots of new Pokemon added back in from the previous National Dex cut that a lot of people were upset about, so a lot of people were happy to see that added back in. There was a lot of new story elements and characters and things to do, especially in the Isle of Armor, specifically in Isle of Armor getting Kubfu and having to train it up, and all of the events at the dojo and battling Mustard and Clara and Avery, and then in the Crown Tundra meeting up with Peony, doing the Dynamax raids, and then the whole quest for the Galarian birds and Calyrex. There was also Regieleki and Regidrago. We also saw a slew of returning and new features that players really enjoyed seeing, such as following Pokemon returning, the addition of the Cramomatic to make all of these new items. There was a move tutor, there was an opportunity to get all of the Alolan regional forms. You could make Max Soup to get those elusive Gigantamax forms that I feel like I didn't really get to use, so I was really happy to see this addition to get some of those forms and finally be able to incorporate them in battle. But I think the biggest thing that I did talk about in my Sword and Shield video that I appreciated from the DLC was in the Crown Tundra with the legendary Dynamax raids and the ability to shiny hunt them in this way. I found it a lot of fun. I still to this day go back and play this game because of this, and I think that that is the ultimate success, like I mentioned mentioned of a post-game or a DLC post-game is it just keeps you coming back for more, even after you've completed the base game. So I think that the Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra DLC taught us that a DLC can not only add additional content, but it can also just add new features of life that make the game feel a whole lot easier and just better and more fun to play. Before we get into Scarlet and Violet's DLC, which I think is the biggest one to talk about, let's briefly talk about Legends Arceus because it did have DLC, and I didn't even mention its post-game because I feel like the post-game was really so meh, there wasn't really anything to talk about, and even its DLC was a little meh. I mean, this DLC was free, it was called Daybreak, it was more of a patch than anything else. We got a couple more quests added on, and we got some brief changes to the mass outbreaks, but other than that, it kind of doesn't really feel like a DLC. It more or less felt like a patch, like I said, of just add-ons. So I wouldn't really say that Legends Arceus is a great example of DLC. So that means let's get into a great example of DLC, talking about the Teal Mask and Indigo Disc DLC from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Similarly to Pokemon Sword and Shield's DLC, we got complete new areas to explore with the region of Kitakami in the Teal Mask, and then the Blueberry Academy in the Unova region for Indigo Disc, as well as a new area of Area 0 to explore to get Terapagos at the end of it. We also got a complete epilogue to get a new mythical Pokemon Pecharunt that takes place in Kitakami in the Mochi Mayhem epilogue. Y'all, words cannot even describe how much I enjoyed this DLC. I would argue that you cannot play Scarlet and Violet without getting this DLC. Like, it really does complete the experience in my opinion, and with just a lot of freaking fun. It added a bunch of new Pokemon, it added a bunch of new features and story elements and new ways to play. I think one of the biggest success stories of this that I have to talk about first is the overarching storyline with Kieran and Carmine. I think that this was really well done. Kieran, I think, is just a really well-written Pokemon rival character, and I enjoyed that the storyline took place over all three of these arcs, and I just think that it was so fun to see how it was all going to turn out, and of course seeing the ending with Kieran in the Mochi Mayhem, especially with our other friends being involved as well from the main storyline. I loved seeing them involved. We also of course have to talk about all of our new legendaries and mythical Pokemon with Ogerpon, the Loyal 3, we have Terapagos and Pecharunt. Also, we need to talk about Perrin and her side quests. I love this diva. This was some of my favorite things to do, was getting all the Pokemon and then being able to complete these quests for her. I loved getting Blood Moon Ursaluna. I was not expecting that at all in the slightest. And then we had all the new Paradox Pokemon to get in the Indigo Disc DLC, and I just really enjoyed doing all this stuff for her. We also in Indigo Disc got a complete new Elite Four and Champion challenge that we had to partake in at the Blueberry Academy, and y'all know how I feel about adding on a new challenge like this, so you know I was here for it, especially if they are well-designed characters, and I really like all four of them. I think they're all great, and then I already mentioned how much I love Kieran's story, so y'all already know about that. We also got a bunch of super fun other additions like the Synchro Machine, which was fun to use and also really cool to get a bunch of footage of Pokemon moving around the map. We got a bunch of cool new outfits. We got the addition of Mochi, which is something that could reset your stats, which was kind of wild. We got the Ogre Ousting minigame, we got a bunch of photography stuff, and just like Sword and Shield's DLC, we also saw a ton of returning Pokemon as well as some other new ones, including new cross-gen evolutions for Diplin, Hydrapple, Archaludon. I think that this DLC for Scarlet and Violet really did the perfect thing for DLC to do, which I think is adding longevity to the game and giving more expansion to something that was already great. DLC, I think, should always be there to add on to a already good product and not fix things that should have been there to begin with. But now that we're at the end of talking about all of it, we've discussed everything. We've discussed all the post games, all the DLC. What do I feel about it? What do I think is better? What do I enjoy more? Well, I think my legitimate answer after going through all of it is both. Wait, hear me out. I know everybody at home is like, oh, we just went through the whole video for him to just say both. He doesn't even pick one. Well, y'all, I legitimately don't think I can pick one because both of them are great in their own ways and they both operate completely differently. I truly think that the biggest thing about the DLC versus post games argument in Pokemon is it's a matter of these are the times that we're living in, and things have changed. We are no longer at a point where we're going to be getting third entries for all the add-on stuff that Pokemon would like to do. I think DLC is the new normal. I think that this is what it is now. I think that Pokemon Postgames have now become DLC in a way. Of course, we're still going to have Postgames and things that we can do afterwards once you complete the base storyline, but I think that DLC from here on out is just going to be a normal thing for every Pokemon mainline entry. To add on new features, to add on more Pokemon, to add on more storylines, and what originally used to be just things we'd find in the post game are now going to be DLC. Based on this discussion and my analysis of DLC and post games, I do think that for these later entries that we're going to be receiving, like Legend ZA and Generation 10 whenever that comes out, I think that a DLC is definitely going to happen for both of them, and I think for Legend ZA that might include another storyline, maybe more side quests, maybe even more Mega Evolutions added in that aren't in the base game. And for Generation 10, I can absolutely see them doing two, just like they did for Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, with it getting a completely separate region to explore and all these new storylines and returning Pokemon as well. I think they're going to keep that trend going because the DLC was so successful for both of these games. I feel like this is going to sound like an ad just to like, oh, you should go buy the DLC for all these Pokemon games. Y'all, no, I'm not going to tell you to go and buy it if you don't want to buy it, but I will tell you, I do think if you are a big Pokemon fan, you're gonna enjoy them. But of course, I do still miss the old days of all the other Pokemon games and older generations where we would just have this stuff in the regular old post game. You didn't have to wait for the DLC to come out. So I do think there's a lot of good things that I will miss, and I wish we could do something like the Battle Frontier again, or something like the World Tournament again, and I really hope to see something like this return in a future post game or DLC for another entry. But I do think that if DLC is going to be the new way that we're going, I think that Pokemon has proven to have what I think is a pretty solid track record so far of having good DLC that really adds on to both games and makes them feel better. But that will be all for today's video. As always, thank y'all so much for watching. I hope you had fun just as much as I had fun making today's video and talking about it. I think that post games and DLC are just really fun, and I do enjoy them a lot, so definitely let me know down in the comment section below which post game or thing about the DLC is your favorite in all of Pokemon from any entry, but also let me know down below if there's anything you'd like to see in the future from post games or DLC specifically. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go replay the Battle Frontier for the 17th time and pray that one day it will make its triumphant return.